Well, James Rana, we have danced around this topic long enough.
Once again, I'm blindfolded.
Yeah, you're blindfolded and blindsided because tonight, on the exclusive film and video report, we're going to talk about a show that we've mentioned in passing on many different installments.
We've done many shows.
That show is Happy Days.
Okay,
we have never sat and talked about Happy Days.
You know, I'm still getting over that episode when we all thought the Fonz was killed in that accident.
Yes, there was that one. You're not talking about when he jumped over the car.
Yes, when he jumped over the car.
See, that's the thing about Happy Days is that's a show that everyone on planet Earth watched all throughout the 70s. And in reruns, we have to go back a bit because it started out as an installment of Love American Style initially.
Yeah, that's true. I've never seen those. But
yeah, with Ron Howard, a different actor playing the Howard Cunningham role.
Oh, really?
I forget who did it, but eventually it did go to series. That served as sort of like a pilot episode. That was Gary Marshall's pilot for Happy Days. And Happy Days gets on the air really to capitalize on the success of American Graffiti, which also starred Ron Howard. And we briefly mentioned that last week on the show. Just a wonderful movie. And that gets the ball rolling for Happy Days, which in its first season was not shot in front of a live studio audience, as they would always say at the beginning of the show. You'd hear Tom Bosley usually, Happy Days is filmed in front of a live studio. That's my Tom Bosley impersonation. Sort of like my Jerry Lewis impersonation. They all sound the same.
I have my Ted McGinley impersonation, so I think we have an act.
That's true. Well, you save that because we'll come to that in this discussion. But the first season of Happy Days is wonderful. The first season of Happy Days, not shot in front of a live studio audience, and more adhering to the time period of which it's set, which I guess is somewhere around 1958, I would assume.
It's very much like watching a colorized version of Ozzie and Harriet with a different cast.
And there's an entirely different dynamic at play. First of all, there's Chuck, the older brother, Richie's older brother, who disappears midway through the series.
He joins the Army or the Navy.
No. I know it. I'll tell you what happens to. Here's what happens to Chuck. Chuck gets a basketball scholarship.
Okay.
Because he was always shooting he was always shooting hoops in the driveway.
Yeah.
He gets a basketball scholarship in Outer Mongolia. They even mentioned this on the show, like as
Are
an
you
in
kidding
joke.
me?
Yes. And that's where he disappeared to. But later on in the series, Howard Cunningham refers to his two kids and how he's proud of them, that he's raised two kids. Never mentions Chuck. Howard and Marion had 3 children. Now, I thought about this. What could Chuck have done that was so bad that he was disowned by the Cunningham family? This is the episode we've never seen. And I thought about it and I figured it out.
What did Chuck
Remember
do?
The episode where Howard Cunningham built a bomb shelter in his backyard?
Yes.
Right. Howard Cunningham was very terrified of the communists. So my thought is that Chuck, he went off to college on that basketball scholarship. He fell in with a beatnik crowd. He got turned on to, Marxist literature, and next thing you know, Chuck becomes a communist, and that is it. He is excommunicated from the Cunningham family, and it mentioned as if he had passed away.
Did the cast ever joke about the Chuck myth, or whatever happened to the actor that played Chuck? It's sort of,
I don't know. Well, actually, 2 actors played Chuck. They couldn't even cast
in one
it.
Season.
Yes. 2 actors. But going back to the very beginning, of course, you had Chuck, who wasn't really around much, all that much. He was sort of He was the older brother to Richie, and Richie would go to him for advice. Obviously, that role would later be taken over by the Fonz.
Of course, the older brother.
But initially, Ralph Malph was one of Fonzie's guys.
He was a goon.
Yeah, he was one of Fonzie's goons. Fonzie was this guy that people were terrified of.
Yeah.
And he didn't wear the leather jacket. He had this light blue windbreaker.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, because he was like a bona fide biker. And the whole show was really about Richie and Potsy. They were like best buddies.
Yeah.
And it was their adventures. Remember they had to go to some dance. They were trying to get into a fraternity or something, and they had to dress up as women. And Fonz danced with Richie. He thought Richie was blowing in Richie's ear. Remember that episode?
I do remember. Not as well as you do, because you probably watched it at 5 a.m.
And, of course, the young Erin Moran as Joni.
She was fresh out of the movie Watermelon Man, a film by Melvin Van Peebles with the late great comedian Godfrey Cambridge.
And she was on the show, of course, as Shortcake. As Joni, as Fonz would inevitably call her,
Shortcake.
And when I watched that show when I was a little tyke,
you were very young.
I can get away with saying this. I was over the moon with Joni. I loved Joni before it was fashionable before Chachi loved Joni.
Really?
I loved Joni.
Really?
Before there was a Chachi.
Really? I thought you would have fallen for Pinky Tuscadero.
No, I didn't fall for Pinky Tuscadero, nor did I fall for Leather Tuscadero, Susie Quattro, who was a guest on this program.
Oh, beautiful. Yes, Leather.
But I liked Joni. I liked Spike better than Chachi. Before there was a Chachi, there was Fonzie's little cousin Spike, who wanted to be just like the Fonz.
I like the episode. I had a crush on the episode when Morgan Fairchild had a little part.
You know, Morgan Fairchild also had a little part, a regular part on Mork and Mindy. She was Pam Dauber's snooty friend.
Very nice.
Who occasionally would get all these, and Mork and Mindy was a spin-off of Happy Days.
A lot of people's career starts on Happy Days. It literally, Tom Hanks.
Yes.
An unknown stage actor from Cleveland. Peter Scolari goes to L.A., gets on Happy Days. We talked about Ted McGinley. Ted McGinley, this was his very first acting role. I did a little research. I went to the library, and I told the head librarian I'm researching.
Ted McGinley.
And she brought out the encyclopedias. Ted McGinley was a lifeguard who got into modeling. His picture is in GQ. The casting director sees him. He's like, oh, this is the perfect all-American kid. Let's bring him in. Let's see if he can talk on camera.
Right.
Next thing you know, he's Roger.
But going back to the very beginnings of Happy Days, the first season, it's Richie and Potsy. Ralph Malph is Fonzie's goon.
Yeah.
In the second season of the show, Fonzie takes off as a character. Fonzie becomes like a fad almost, and there's this whole nostalgia craze going on in the country, spurred on by American Graffiti and Happy Days. There were all these oldies records that were being sold on television. I had Graffiti Scrapbook, which was sort of a loose tie-in with American Graffiti. It's WCBS FM here. Went all oldies, and it was like this oldies mania. Groups like the Bay City Rollers were doing songs like Saturday Night, which were very reminiscent of songs from the late 50s, early 60s.
On the Broadway stage of Grease.
Right, Grease, exactly. So the zeitgeist, it was in the air. People were really into this. I think it was this hangover from the 60s. We had gotten so far out in the 60s, we were like trying to rein it all back in and enjoy a more innocent time. And Happy Days, in the third season, that's when they went to a live studio audience, and that's when they made the Fonz a focal point of the show. I'll say this. I think the show jumped the shark before Fonz literally jumped the shark. Now, I watched the show religiously as a kid, but watching it now, all these years later, the first two episodes are fantastic, and then it becomes all about the Fonz. Every show is about the Fonz. It used to be, what was going on with Richie, what was going on with Joni, family plots. Mm-hmm. And then somehow it all became about what the Fonz was up to, and the family was sort of like a satellite around the Fonz. But
there was a great ensemble. You're exactly correct. There was even a special Henry Winkler meets Shakespeare, where Fonzie meets William Shakespeare. The episode when the Fonz got his library card, that week, librarians around the country said more people ever applied for a library card.
Well, remember, there was a Fonzie pinball machine. There was even a Fonzie album. I remember that. It
He
advertised
put out
on
an
TV.
album?
Yeah, and I don't think Henry Winkler sang really, but it was
He
somebody.
could've-
It was like, "Hey, Fonz." It was like the Fonzettes sang a song.
There was a Happy Days board game. There was
Yes.
a Happy Days. I think we had it growing up. There was a Happy Days lunchbox and thermos.
Oh yeah. Well, when I was a kid, it was you were either into Happy Days or you're into the Sweat Hogs or both. And I loved them all. But watching the show now I loved it as a kid all the way through. I think I left the show not when Fonzie jumped the shark. I was with the program when Fonzie was doing. He'd already jumped cars, And what was those guys, the Malachi brothers, the Malachi Crush that they did on Pinky Tuscadero, and they put her in the hospital. It was like a big serious.
I remember. We were worried as a child. My sister was worried about Pinky Tuscadero. One of the coolest thing was when we thought there was going to be a gang war. And they played baseball. That was so cool. They had a game.
I like
baseball.
the one where these guys, these local toughs, were going to beat up Richie, and Richie decided that he was going to. Fonz was going to help him out, and Richie said, "No, I'll take care of it." And Richie just pretended to act crazy in Arnold's. He just freaked out at Arnold's, and they were like, "Whoa, this guy's nuts!" And they all left, and Richie won. Remember when Richie was trying to shoot the basket and he didn't get the basket, and he and Mr. C had this. Heartwarming father and son talk in the darkened auditorium, and at the very end, Howard offered him a lifesaver. These are wonderful TV moments.
Some great acting also. You have Pat Morita as Arnold. Also, Al Molinaro takes over, and he renames the place Al's.
Why does Pat Morita leave? That's what I want to know.
I really don't know. He was I don't know, doing
Was he
stuff.
going to shepherd Chuck in Outer Mongolia? For that
He
basketball
might
scholarship?
have. He might have. But what's interesting is that Al Molinaro takes on two roles. He plays Al, then he also plays his cousin, who's a priest.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right.
This is great character acting.
And how many people from previous Gary Marshall shows show up? Of course, Al Molinaro was Murray the Cop on Odd Couple.
And this is
Penny
also,
Marshall.
you have Penny Marshall and Cindy Williams. They're introduced as the loose women. We talked about that.
Yeah, we talked about that when Laverne and Shirley goes to series. They change the characters a bit because if you watch that episode where Fonz brings Laverne and Shirley over,
Yeah.
Shirley's as big a whore as Laverne is. She's really trying to get something going with Richie.
I can't believe you used that word.
I did use that word, whore. I called Shirley Feeney a whore.
But there's been some wonderful things on that program. So many careers started, and by just saying that about Shirley Feeney, I lost my train of thought. So thank you.
Well, I'm sorry, but I'll say this. I will say this. When Laverne and Shirley takes off, that was a brilliant Tuesday night on ABC. 8 o'clock, Happy Days. 8:30, Laverne and Shirley. And also, when the show goes to a studio audience, we get the catchphrases like "sit on it."
Sit on it, yeah.
Right? And, of course, Chachi comes into the picture. By the way, Chachi...
He didn't work for me.
He didn't
I'm
work for
sorry.
me either. Spike was the guy.
You like Spike?
I liked Spike because Spike looked like a kid from the 1950s. Chachi, he had hair over his ears. He looked like a kid that walked out of Tiger Beat in 1976. He did not deserve to be sitting around he didn't fit the time period.
I love the fact that everyone, called Fonzie the Fonz except Mrs. Cunningham Arthur.
Oh, yes.
That
was a nice moment when she would kiss Fonz and he would get all bashful. The whole idea, he'd be like, "Oh, Mrs. C," because Fonz, of course, it would just snap his fingers and the women would run over. But he was so smitten with Mrs. C. In fact, there was an episode where Howard thought that they were having an affair. Do you remember that?
I think I did. Yeah. Wasn't she helping him or something like that?
Yeah, well, he was taking dancing. She wanted to be a dancer. It was like ballroom dancing, and Howard wouldn't do it, so Fonz was doing it on the side, and everybody thought that they were having an affair.
It's funny about that because, yes, he jumps the shark, but if you look at the opening credits, the star of the show is Tom Bosley.
Yes.
You got Tom Bosley, who is this in the 1950s, is this huge Broadway star. In the 60s, he wins the Tony Award for Best Actor for Fiorello. He plays Mayor LaGuardia.
Right.
And then he gets a movie contract, and he plays a lot of dads, which is perfect.
Of course, he's perfect.
And then I think Happy Days was a direct offer.
Yeah,
that was
probably,
a direct,
sure.
I think everyone else, but that was a direct offer for Tom Bosley. They're thrilled to get. He was a member of the Lodge.
Yes. The Raccoon Lodge. And then, see, this is the thing. Like, you're sitting there with no research at all. I'm sitting here with no research at all. We don't need it. This show is part of our DNA. We watch this show. I don't think generations now, I don't think young people now, I don't care if it's The Big Bang Theory or any other show that's really huge. I don't think any show out there right now is as pervasive in the culture as Happy Days was at that time.
I do think, and I'm just going to say it, I think they should have ended earlier.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, things that shouldn't have happened, and we're running long here, but
this is important.
The things that shouldn't have happened, Arnold's should never have burned down.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Chachi burned it down. Remember, he left the stove on.
Okay.
So, and it should never have been rechristened Big Al. They should never have had that horrible wood-paneled, that auburn wood that they put. It was ridiculous.
You're bothered
looking.
by the interior of Al.
Yes, I was bothered by Arnold's was an establishment that was part of our cultural psyche. It should never have been burned down. I don't think that we ever should have seen Jenny Piccolo. We went.
You didn't like Jenny Piccolo?
No. We went 6 seasons without ever hearing. We only heard about Jenny Piccolo from Joni, and then we see Jenny Piccolo. What a buzzkill! Look, the actress is a wonderful girl, and it was cute to see. But come on, it was like the Maris joke on Frasier. You're never supposed to see her.
That was her best friend Jenny Piccolo. I remember.
And that show should have went off the air when Richie left. Our mutual love for Ted McGinley and his wonderful acting and what he brings to TV shows, especially Married with Children, setting that aside, when Richie left the show, that should have been the end of Happy Days. They never should have put the focus on Joni and Chachi.
No.
There should never have been that spin-off at all.
How long was that? 1 season?
2 seasons.
Okay.
Yeah. And Joni and Chachi in real life, Scott Baio and Aaron Moran, were an
in
item,
a relationship, yeah.
But by the time that series came on, they had broken up.
You know what's interesting? During that same time as Joni Loves Chachi, there's another spin-off, Gloria, with Sally Struthers.
I don't remember that one.
She had left All in the Family.
Of course, right.
She actually tried to sue her way, get her way out,
right.
and then to do movies, and it's not working out. So then Norman Lear's like, "You want to come back?" And she's like, "Yeah." And then You want your own series with Burgess Meredith?
I don't remember that show at all.
One season.
That's got something to do with Happy Days?
No. But
Why did you bring it up? We're talking
because
about
it's
Happy
important.
Days.
Anyway, all I'm saying is I think one of the greatest intros to a show.
Oh, it's wonderful. The jukebox and everything. I stole that from my oldies show. And of course the spinning records with them in the center. And look, my heart soars when Joni's got the hula hoop out at the very beginning. I feel like I'm home again when I'm watching the show.
Quickly. One, the cast was still very upset. There was something that had to do with a slot machine.
A slot. Oh, yes, there was a Happy Days slot machine in Vegas.
Yeah.
And they, of course, I guess the company who put it out had no right to do it, and the Happy Days cast sued. And did they win that lawsuit?
They did. Everyone sued except for Ron Howard. He didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Right. Well, he doesn't need the money. He's got. I'm sure that. Look, everybody on that show was great. Anson Williams would sing on occasion on that show. Remember, he would come out. Remember, Joni fell in love with him for that one episode. We could go on.
This would be a 3-parter.
This should be. We'll have to continue it at some point. But we're over the 15-minute mark talking about Happy Days here. It feels like it was 5 minutes because it's so rich. We could talk about this forever. Let me just say this to you, James Rana.
Yes.
I still got it.